I want you to picture a moment that might feel a little uncomfortably familiar. You're sitting in a meeting, or maybe you're just standing in line for a coffee. Everything's fine. And then, without any warning, the world just tilts.
Tilts. Wow, yeah. That's a really powerful way of describing it.
Yeah. It's like the audio mix of your life just suddenly goes all wrong.
Yeah.
The background hum of the refrigerator, it sounds like a jet engine. The lights feel sharp, like they're actually poking your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And the tag on the back of your shirt, which you didn't even notice 10 minutes ago, suddenly feels like a serrated knife against your neck.
And the instinct is to just snap or run or both.
Exactly. And, usually people tell you to get over it or stop being so sensitive. But today, we are validating that experience. We're talking about sensory overload.
Yes.
And we are not just talking about being annoyed. We're digging into the biological traffic jam that happens in the nervous system.
This is such a crucial topic because for a long time, this was just dismissed as behavioral. A kid throwing a tantrum or an adult who's just being difficult.
Right.
But we're looking at a guide from HeySD today that really, it flips the script on that.
And the source here really matters. HeySD is an autistic-led organization. They focus so heavily on sensory-friendly design. I mean, right down to their clothing. So this isn't some medical textbook written by someone observing from a distance.
No, this is lived experience.
Exactly. And it's backed by the neuroscience.
That distinction, it just changes everything. When you read the clinical definitions, they're always talking about deficits. But when you read something from the lived autistic perspective, like this guide, they talk about capacity and filtering. It's so much more about the mechanics of how we process the world.
So let's get into those mechanics, because I think most people hear sensory overload and they just think, oh, it's too loud. But it's so much more complex than just volume, isn't it?
Oh, much more complex. The guide defines sensory overload as the moment when the world becomes too much for the nervous system to hold.
Okay.
So think of your brain as this high-speed data center. It is constantly receiving input visuals, sounds, temperatures, smells, everything. And it has to sort that data instantly.
It has to decide what to pay attention to and what to just let go.
Correct. That's the filter. When you're functioning well, your brain says, okay, pay attention to the voice of the person talking to you. Ignore the hum of the AC unit. But in sensory overload, that filter, it jams.
The guide uses the traffic jam analogy for this, which I found really, really helpful to visualize.
It's the best way to understand it, I think. Imagine your neural pathways are a highway. Information is the traffic. Normally, cars are moving, they're merging, taking their exits.
Right, it flows.
It flows. But during overload, you have 5 lanes of traffic all trying to merge into one lane at 80 miles an hour.
And there are no exit ramps.
None. The system just gets completely gridlocked. Competing information comes in faster than the brain can prioritize it. So instead of prioritizing the conversation you're having, your brain marks everything as urgent.
Everything.
The AC unit is urgent. The flickering light is urgent. The smell of someone's coffee is urgent.
And when the brain gets stuck in that gridlock, it doesn't just display an error message. It triggers a physical response.
It panics. It absolutely panics. This is where we have to talk about the sympathetic nervous system. This is your ancient, biological hardware.
Okay.
When the brain can't process that flood of data, it interprets the confusion as a threat. It assumes you are in danger.
So the fight or flight response kicks in, even if you're just in a grocery store.
Exactly. Your body dumps adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream. Your heart rate spikes. You might start sweating. Your body is preparing to fight a tiger.
But the tiger is just
the combination of fluorescent lights and holiday music.
That explains the urge to flee the guide talks about.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely felt that. You're at a party or some networking event, and suddenly you have this primal, totally irrational need to just get out.
But see, it's not irrational. That's the thing. It's biological. That is your brain screaming escape because it has lost control of the environment.
Wow.
And because it's a reflex, you can't just think your way out of it. You can't just tell yourself, calm down, it's just a party. Your physiology has already hijacked the controls.
Let's make this more concrete. The guide gives a couple of scenarios, and I want to walk through them because they really show how these inputs stack up. They mention the cafe scenario.
Oh, a classic. So you're trying to catch up with a friend. If your sensory filter is working, you hear your friend. Simple. But if you're heading toward overload, the hierarchy of sound collapses.
The what collapses?
The hierarchy. Suddenly you hear the barista banging the coffee grounds out of the portafilter. You hear the high-pitched whine of the milk steamer. You hear the indie rock playlist.
And the scraping of chairs on the floor.
Yes. And in your brain, the scraping chair is just as loud and just as important as your friend's voice. You have to use incredible mental effort just to separate the signal from the noise.
Which is exhausting.
It depletes your battery in minutes.
The other example they give is the department store, which feels like the final boss of sensory overload.
It really is. It
Yeah.
really is. You have the visual chaos, flashing lights, shiny surfaces, crowds moving unpredictably. Then the heat stores are often way too hot in the winter.
Yes.
Then the noise. And then the perfume counter.
Ooh, the wall of scent.
Scent is such a powerful trigger because it bypasses the thalamus and goes straight to the emotional center of the brain. So you get hit with this chemical assault combined with the lights and the noise, and it just pushes the system right over the edge.
It's interesting you mentioned the unpredictable crowds. The guide touches on this, that lack of personal space you're
Right.
being bumped into.
That's tactile input. And if you're already sensitive, a stranger brushing past you can feel like a physical blow. It activates that threat response all over again.
So we know what's happening biologically. But what does it look like from the outside? Because the guide makes a really important distinction between how this shows up in adults versus kids.
Yeah, and this is where we get into the concept of masking. Adults, especially those who've grown up undiagnosed or just trying to fit in, we've learned to internalize this distress.
The hamster on a wheel description they used.
That's it. Externally, you might just look a bit quiet or maybe irritable. But internally, your thoughts are racing. You might have sudden anxiety. A big one is decision paralysis.
Yeah.
You're standing in the cereal aisle and you literally cannot choose a box because your brain has zero processing power left to make one more decision.
I think a lot of people will relate to that. That
Yeah.
feeling of, I cannot answer one more question right now.
Precisely. It's not stubbornness. The buffer is full.
And for kids,
Yeah.
it's much more explosive.
Right. Usually, yes. And unfortunately, it's so often labeled a tantrum. But the guide points out these specific signs that it's sensory overload, uncontrollable crying, especially that wet-faced, gasping kind of crying where they can't catch their breath,
Yeah.
covering ears or eyes.
Or the shutdown.
Right. Some kids don't explode, they implode. They go nonverbal. They retreat into a corner or under a table. They are physically disconnecting from the world to try and stop the input.
I want to pivot to something the guide spends a lot of time on, which I think is fascinating.
Mhm.
The triggers. We've mentioned the big three: noise, light, smell. Okay, those are obvious. But the guide calls tactile triggers the silent drain.
I'm so glad we're digging into this because this is really HAC's specialty. We tend to ignore touch unless it's actively painful. But for so many people, clothing is a constant low-level assault.
It's that death by 1,000 cuts thing.
It is. Think about a waistband that digs in just a little too much when you sit down, or a tag that scratches, or a sock seam that's twisted.
Most people would say just ignore it.
But ignoring it costs energy. That's the key insight here. Your brain has to spend actual glucose, actual biological energy to actively suppress that signal.
Oh,
It's like having a background app running on your phone that's just using 20% of your CPU. You might not be looking at the app, but it is draining your battery.
so by 2 p.m., you're exhausted, not because the work was hard, but because you've been fighting your own pants for 6 hours.
Exactly. And this is why the silent drain is so dangerous. You don't realize it's happening until you crash.
The other environment we have to talk about, and I know this is going to resonate with our listeners, is the open plan office.
The nemesis of the sensitive nervous system.
The guide lists this as a major environmental trigger. Why is it so bad?
Because it combines everything. You have visual distraction movement in your peripheral vision constantly, which triggers a look, reflex. You have the auditory chaos, multiple conversations, ringing phones, notification pings.
That ding from a team chat can induce rage. I swear.
It's an unpredictable interrupt. And then you have the social pressure. In an open office, you are always perceivable. You can never fully relax your face or your body because someone might look at you. That vigilance is just, it's exhausting.
So who is most susceptible to this? Obviously, the guide focuses on autism.
Yes, hypersensitivity is a core part of the autistic diagnostic criteria. The autistic brain often lacks the gating mechanism that filters out repetitive stimuli. So that fan humming, it doesn't fade into the background, it stays present.
But there's a section here on ADHD that's autism plus ADHD that I found really sticky. It feels like a paradox.
It feels like a biological contradiction, and it's incredibly difficult to live with. Think about it. The ADHD brain is often dopamine starved. It's understimulated. It is hunting for novelty, for noise, for something interesting. It wants to hit the gas pedal.
So you seek out the chaos. You want the busy cafe.
You do, but the autistic part of your nervous system is hypersensitive. It has a
Huh.
very low threshold for overload. It wants to slam on the brakes.
So you're revving the engine with the parking brake on.
And that causes the engine to overheat. The guide points out that ADHDers often cycle rapidly between, I need more stimulation, I'm so bored, and oh my God, everything is too loud, I need to hide. It makes managing your energy incredibly tricky because the target is always moving.
And we should clarify, neurotypical people experience overload too. This isn't just...
Absolutely. This isn't exclusive to neurodivergence at all. If you're hungover, if you have the flu, if you're grieving, or just chronically stressed,
Right.
your filter weakens.
Right.
The difference is that for neurotypical people, it's usually situational. For neurodivergent people, it's a baseline reality they have to navigate every single day.
Okay, let's clarify one technical term before we get to solutions.
Yeah.
The guide distinguishes between sensory overload and SPD, or sensory processing disorder. What's the difference?
Think of overload as the event, it's the crash. SPD is the underlying condition. The guide uses a great headache analogy.
Yeah.
Anyone can get a headache if they stare at a screen too long. That's overload.
Okay, that makes sense.
But not everyone has chronic migraines. That's SPD. SPD is a neurological condition where the brain consistently struggles to receive and respond to information from the senses.
Got it. Okay, so we've established that the world is loud, our clothes are scratching us, and our brains are jamming. What do we do about it?
We have to reframe our relationship with comfort. The guide has this fantastic quote: "Comfort is not indulgence, it's regulation."
I have to. Well, let me push back on that for a second, though, because that sounds great on a podcast, but in the real world, in a corporate office or a busy classroom, isn't that just impractical? You can't just tell your boss, sorry, the lights are too bright, I'm regulating.
You're right, and the guide doesn't shy away from that reality. You can't control the whole world. But it's not about demanding the world change for you instantly. It's about recognizing that if you don't find a way to regulate, maybe by wearing those noise-canceling headphones during deep work or asking to dim the lights in your specific cubicle, your productivity is going to tank anyway. It reframes comfort from being a luxury to being maintenance. You wouldn't drive a car with the check engine light on just to be tough.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So let's look at the toolkit. The guide breaks this down into in-the-moment rescue tools and then prevention. So let's say the crash is happening, you're in the traffic jam, what now?
You need to manually override the fight or flight system. The first step is breathing, but specifically structured breathing. The guide suggests 3-3-3 breathing. Inhale for 3 seconds, hold for 3, exhale for 3.
Why does the holding part matter?
It forces the heart rate to slow down. It sends a signal to the vagus nerve that basically says, we are not running from a bear. If we were running, we wouldn't be holding our breath. It hacks the system.
Okay. Then there's grounding, the 5-4-3-2-1 method.
This is all about shifting your brain's processing power. You name 5 things you can see, 4 you can feel, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste.
Right.
It forces your brain to switch from internal alarm mode to external observation mode. It re-engages the prefrontal cortex.
The one that surprised me, but makes total sense now, is deep pressure.
Oh, this is huge. Tight hugs, weighted blankets, or even just squeezing your own arms.
But why does that work? It feels like being squeezed would be more sensory input.
It is input, but it's proprioceptive input. It tells your brain where your body is in space. When you're in overload, you often feel scattered or floaty. Deep pressure is grounding. It releases serotonin and dopamine. It's literally the biological opposite of the fight or flight signal.
Okay, so that's how you stop the bleeding. But how do you prevent the injury in the first place? The guide talks about a sensory diet.
And this isn't about food. It's a personalized menu of sensory activities that you do throughout the day. If you're an ADHD who needs stimulation, maybe your diet includes listening to fast music in the morning. If you're easily overwhelmed, maybe it includes 20 minutes silence before work.
And this brings us right back to clothing and environment, the prevention part.
Yes. Unmasking via clothing. This is Hey ASD's core mission. If you can eliminate the tactile triggers, if you wear the tag-free shirt, the soft fabrics, the loose waistband, you are essentially freeing up all that processing power.
You're closing those background apps.
Exactly. You are reclaiming that energy. If you know fluorescent lights drain you, wear blue light glasses or a hat. If you know noise is an issue, bring the loop earplugs or the headphones. It's all about anticipating the drain and plugging the leak before it starts.
The guide also mentions safe spaces, which sounds lovely, but again, in a small apartment or a busy office.
A safe space doesn't have to be a sensory deprivation tank. It can be a corner of a room with a soft pillow. It can be the bathroom stall at work for 5 minutes of silence. It's just a designated zone where the input is controlled and predictable.
It's knowing you have an escape hatch.
And predictability is key. Routine is a massive energy saver. If your brain knows exactly what is going to happen next, it doesn't have to waste energy scanning for threats.
This all seems to circle back to this idea of sensory self-advocacy.
Which is hard.
Yeah.
It is really hard to say, I need to leave this party because it's too loud. We feel rude. We feel broken.
But the alternative is burnout.
The alternative is a meltdown or a shutdown that takes days to recover from. Self-advocacy is just preventative medicine.
So if we zoom out, what are the big takeaways for someone listening who might be realizing, wait a minute, this is me?
First, validate the biology. This is not a character flaw. Your brain is processing more information than it can handle. That is a mechanical reality.
Second,
The silent drain matters. Do not underestimate the power of those minor discomforts like clothing or lights. They accumulate.
and finally,
Sensitivity is information. If we stop viewing it as a weakness and start viewing it as data about our own limits, we can design lives that are actually sustainable for us.
it raises a really interesting question to leave on. If we designed our world, our offices, our schools, our homes, for the person with the most sensitive nervous system, instead of for the person with the strongest filter,
We'd all be a lot more comfortable, wouldn't we?
I think we would. So here's our challenge to you listening. Identify just one silent drain in your life today. Maybe it's the notification sound on your phone. Maybe it's that one sweater that always makes you itch. Identify it and change it, just that one thing, and see if the world tilts a little less tomorrow.
Small changes, big relief.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
A pleasure.